When you look in the mirror, all you see is America's most incoherent podcast. That's us, the pod people. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm surrounded by the mise-en-scène of nightmares.
I'm Ben Sheets, and did you know that stinking in the basement's okay if you've got the right books?
Exactly.
And I'm Cleveland Mosier, and I went off this carnival ride.
Oh, man.
Yep.
This is the most at loss for words I've ever been for
God damn it.
a movie.
Though I have words, and it's God damn it, Ben.
This was an enigma of a movie.
Was it? I think we know exactly what this movie was.
So, before we go any farther, more seriously than I've ever said this before, the best way to watch this movie is knowing absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So if you want to go watch The Evil Within, do it, because it will be most enjoyable if you don't know anything about it going in.
But also, I feel like the context adds a lot to this movie.
Yes, but I think it's good. It's better for after the context filling in. So
it made me less mad. It made me less angry after watching the film, at least.
I'm pretty sure The Evil Within is on Amazon Prime.
It is, yes.
You've been warned. Go check it out.
Or don't. That's okay, too.
Yeah, either or, honestly.
Really?
Oh, but
My take may vary.
I thought this movie was kind of fascinating, honestly.
Oh, yeah, it was. Like, it was the strangest, most beautiful disaster I've seen in a really, really long time.
Yeah, I would say this movie is equal parts David Lynch and Tommy Wiseau.
Yes. You said that during the movie, and I think that that is actually an extremely apt analogy. There are so many things that this movie is trying to be, but I think that Wiseau meets Lynch is like the best, simplest way to qualify it.
Yeah. I know someone who did a write-up for this movie also compared it to Nightmare on Elm Street meets the Simple Jack character from Tropic Thunder, which... is also surprisingly apt.
Yeah.
Let's stop being completely vague. The context that you mentioned is important. This film came out officially in 2017, but it has been in production since 2002, I believe.
I think actually 2000, because Andrew Getty actually died in 2015.
Yeah.
But he was working for 15 years on this movie.
That's right.
In the throes of a meth addiction.
And we should note that by Andrew Getty, we mean the grandson of John Paul Getty and erstwhile heir to the Getty oil empire.
Yes. So,
which is the weirdest possible thing that I think could have happened is this movie from that family.
Yes, exactly.
The strange, tragic story of the Getty empire continues.
Well, what's fascinating about it is this movie was all obviously self-funded since he had the fucking money for it.
And similarly to Tommy Wiseau, I think he put about $6 million of his own money into it.
Yes, he did.
Similar to The Room.
But the reason I bring that up is this movie is not a movie any studio would touch with a 10-foot pole.
It certainly is unique for that reason, because there's no kind of grounding oversight. It was something that Andrew Getty was like obsessed with. It's apparently based on a series of nightmares that he had. This and methamphetamine became all consuming for him for like 15 years until he died.
If I had to describe it, I would consider this film very similar to an Adult Swim modern psychedelic.
Almost like Tim and Eric's bedtime story.
Like a Tim and Eric bedtime story situation, but...
An extended Too Many Cooks.
The key difference is this is rife with self-importance. It is rife with it. Like,
and
this
devoid,
movie is
and devoid of irony.
No irony at all. It is very full of itself. And if this film had just
way
lightened
less
up a little
self-aware.
bit, if it had just calmed down for a second, like if it just chilled the fuck out, it would have fit beautifully into Adult Swim, and I could have had a much more fun time watching this movie.
Oh man, I love how gleefully not self-aware it is though.
Yeah,
because
same,
this
dude.
movie is honestly, it's borderline offensive. Like the whole crux of the plot is
It's just offensive.
Beyond borderline,
yeah,
I think, yeah.
Well,
Hang on, no, I think we should hold off on that because I think what is so important to the way that this movie unfolds is the sequence of events without knowing anything.
Okay, yes.
So before we talk about like what the movie becomes, I want to talk about how it starts.
Yeah, let's just unpack the opener.
Because
I agree.
first impressions, I could not believe what I was watching because it was the last thing I expected.
It was bizarre and surrealistic.
Completely surrealistic, very Lynchian, but way more pretentious, and done on what, if I had to guess, I would have guessed as like a film student budget. Like the first 20 minutes struck me very much as like pretentious film student. It's like super surreal, and there's this obnoxious fucking voiceover that is just
It's rough.
Just rife with big words, which get some context later.
becomes somewhat thematic.
Well,
Yeah.
half thought thematics, because we can, we'll unpack that. But the thing that was like the worst about that narration is, I mean, anytime where you get narration of just what is occurring in front of you is generally obnoxious. And this is one of the worst instances of it I've seen. Like when he gets on the little theme park like carousel thing, and like it just kind of goes into the dark of the carousel, and he just describes it as it went into the dark and into the dark and into the spooky dark. And I was just like, Christ, we see it. We know. I get it.
The narration struck me as like faux poetic.
Right.
Like into the dark and into the dark, like as something that
But the delivery
that
wasn't.
that an idiot would think of as like poetic repetition.
Yes.
But in fact just comes across as imbecilic.
Like if it had been like a monologue where we didn't see anything that was happening, like you could almost pull it off. Just a person like talking to someone in a room saying, yeah, and then it just went into the dark and into the dark. And like you could almost get away with it. But having just like you seeing it happening is just, it's rough. It's just so fake, fucking teenagery. Like this movie is just like it's so juvenile.
Comically misguided.
Yes.
So yes, Christ.
This is maybe the blindest I've ever gone into a movie we've talked about on the show. All I knew was what you told us last week, Ben, is that it was a vanity project made by Andrew Getty. And what I expected coming off of that is something like The Cleaver from The Sopranos. Corrupt, bro-y money's idea of like a horror movie. I was expecting like Chris Moltisanti level kind of shit.
I might have preferred that. I don't know. That sounds
And-
kind of fun.
Honestly, I think I preferred what we got here because what I was not expecting was Dumb Guy Art House.
Dumb Guy
horror.
Art House.
Dumb Guy Art
And
House.
it's like in 100% earnesty too.
Yes.
Like he was super focused on every element of this film and every shot. And like even though it's so dumb and so misguided, and like the sequences are comically misguided too, it feels like there was so much effort put into it.
That's the thing. Like it does, unlike a lot of bad horror movies, it doesn't feel lazy. It feels almost like Kubrick level meticulous, but so self-indulgent and incompetent, but unaware of its own incompetence.
It comes off as try hard.
So this whole part that we've been describing or not really describing at the beginning is it looks like, in terms of the effects, it almost looks like an FMV game.
Oh, yeah,
The
it
green
does, doesn't
screen
it?
is really terrible. There's way too many crossfades. There's this part where like the protagonist is supposed to be as a child who's at like a carnival with his mom, but like the whole backdrop is just very obviously a green screen.
Yeah, well, and it's so bizarre because he's like dubbing over himself as a kid, but the mom is
None of the
speaking,
other
like,
characters
normal.
are dubbed
Yeah.
over. Yeah, so it's like the voice of this grown man doing a child's voice coming out of a child's mouth, but it's the only one that's dubbed over. He has this whole thing about going into the haunted, was supposedly the scariest haunted house ride and going through it, and it's nothing. But then when he gets off, it's like, oh, what if the ride never ended?
The way that's revealed is he's trying to demand his mom to get their money back.
Yeah.
Because that's what kids totally do when they're disappointed.
Yeah, they don't really care about finances.
And she takes off her sunglasses and she has mouths where her eyes should be.
Neil Gaiman did it better.
And then he comes out of this dream and into another dream where it's him as an adult and he's lying in bed and he's like, I'm just dreaming about being here in bed, and ooh, the spooky man is already in the room, and there's a spooky man, and it's Matthew Berryman.
Yeah.
is the spooky man. The few times they have him talk, it's obvious that he's wearing big fake teeth because he's lisping all of his lines.
I thought, honestly, he had my favorite performance in the movie, though.
Yeah,
like,
I agree. He was the best. But then the character Dennis is like, oh, I found myself in a basement, and here's this big spooky mirror and all of this stuff, and I couldn't tell if I was awake or dreaming. Like, that's a whole theme in this movie, is like, what's a dream and what's not, handled very clumsily. But then we get the reveal when it cuts to supposedly the waking life. He's in the park having a picnic with his brother and his girlfriend. And the reveal is that this whole inner monologue that we've been hearing is just his inner voice, and that he's actually mentally handicapped. And it's this guy doing this straight up offensive handicapped person impersonation with the voice
for the entire
and the arms
film.
And once again, it's not lazy. You can tell that he's giving it his all.
No, that actor like really put everything he had into it.
He's like, honestly, I find his performance kind of impressive.
Well, I got a really weird sense of deja vu in the first like 5 minutes of after that reveal, being like, I've seen this before. What the fuck is going on? And it turns out there's it's like an NCIS or like a Criminal Minds or something.
He's
like
been on all of
TV
those
show.
shows.
Yeah, he actually has, and like several back to back. So I'm not sure which one it was specifically when I looked it up on IMDb, but in one of those types of shows, in like 2012 or so, he played a mentally handicapped guy.
so that was after this movie was shot.
Yeah, like
Or amidst it,
around
even.
that, yeah, right. What's so weird about it? Like, and
because they were shooting for the whole 15
get
years.
this. He played the exact same character. He played a mentally handicapped guy in the episode, and they're trying to find the murderer or whatever. And at the very end, there's a big reveal where he gives the spooky eyes, and you find out that he's the murderer, and that he was faking being mentally handicapped the whole time. That was the TV episode.
I wonder if he brought that from The Evil Within into...
Or vice versa. We don't know. Like,
Well, no, not vice versa, because this started shooting in 2000.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was that.
Apparently, from the article you sent us, Ben, there only 2 actors were there for the entire 15 years of production, and it was Matthew Berryman and the guy who plays Frederick Kaler, who plays Dennis. And I thought it was funny that he said that he was just out of college when he started working on it, and then when he finished working on it, he had turned 40. So,
oh my god.
And I didn't really think anything of it while we were watching the movie, but there were definitely some scenes where he looked like significantly older than he was.
Like his hair was like a little grayer almost. Like
It seemed like they almost shot in like spurts. Like a good chunk of the movie would be him as one age, and then you'd get like pickup shots where like he was at a different age.
I think that kind of is how they did it, but also like when we were watching the credits, just the sheer number of credited people on this movie and like the way that they arranged the credits, there's at least 25 gaffers. there's at least 5 of every single position on a film
Yeah, there
set.
were like 15 ADs and
Yeah, there were literally like 20 some like first and second ADs. It's insane. So that must mean that they were continually filming this shit for 15 fucking years.
yes, and just getting
constantly
different
hiring new people
different
because they couldn't
crews.
keep anybody on. But this one kid and Matthew Barryman, who God bless them, stuck around for the whole thing. I mean, they were obviously doing other work on the side, but it's just, oh my God, it's completely baffling. It's hard to talk about this character, Dennis, in the context of this podcast because it can't be done without imitating what he sounds like, and I'm not gonna do that.
I want to reference the scene from Quantum Leap where the guy looks in the mirror and sees a mentally handicapped version of himself. Like, that's what I was thinking about during this, because it's very similar. Like,
so much of this movie is like him talking with like his evil counterpart in the mirror.
yes, and the evil counterpart at first, is also acting very
Disabled.
disabled.
Yes. I'm disabled.
But as the movie goes on, obviously, you see
It drops that facade, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you find out that it's a demon possessing him.
Well, one actually shot that I thought was super cool was right before the picnic scene in that dream sequence between the two.
Oh, yeah.
Where Matthew Berryman comes out and puts the zipper all
I thought that
across
was really
the
cool
back
also.
of him and opens him up and just
climbs
inside of him.
Well,
I thought that was awesome.
What was the name of the movie that we watched for one of the wrap-ups? Kevin Isn't Real or whatever. Barry Isn't There. What is it called?
Daniel Isn't Real.
That's it. Yeah, that one. They had that a similar scene where he like opens up the
yeah, they
guy and
do.
steps into him.
I was super impressed by the practical.
Yeah, that's
in
the
that
weird.
respect.
That's the weird thing is like overall, the aesthetic of this movie is not very good, but sometimes it looks pretty
Comparable.
nice,
Like,
pretty nice.
yeah.
The performance is just like wild, but the scene where he like walks into the like hallway of mirrors,
Yeah, I thought
and he's
that
like
whole
lit
sequence was
from
pretty
below
fun.
and like walking around touching things, then he reaches out his hand and
so
touches what he
those
thinks is a
shots
mirror,
looked very good.
and it's Matthew Berryman's hand that he's touching. Like there's some like legitimately cool stuff in this movie,
yeah.
which is not what I was expecting, but then it's just like rammed between just like downright laughable, offensive nonsense and like the room level incompetent melodrama.
And like the problem even there with the sequence of him like walking down the hallway touching all the mirrors
lasts so long.
is well it does last a lifetime, but like also for as cool as it looks, there's just nothing tying you to the scene. There's nothing tying you to any of this film. Who are you supposed to like in the movie? Who are you supposed to relate to?
I couldn't tell you.
Who are you supposed to care? Why am I supposed to care about anyone or anything in this film?
Because they're treating it like Dennis is being like taken advantage of, because like his brother treats him, and we'll get into his brother, but his brother, like in that first scene at the house where he just like brings the spooky mirror into his room and it's like, we're gonna put it here because it matches the staining on the windowsill or whatever.
What? Slow down.
And just like we're starting off supposed to believe that like Dennis is being mistreated and that like he's supposed to be the sympathetic one, but he is also a terrible asshole. And then starts, at the behest of his reflection, starts murdering pets and children.
Yeah, working his way up.
And hiding them in the basement and
Taxidermying them.
Taxidermying them.
Well,
it's like, I don't know who we're supposed to root for.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on? And so like it just, so much of that just feels like just lost and wasted. And in the room there's very little to legitimately enjoy.
Yeah,
Facts, yeah. True. So, like, there's very little to legitimately enjoy in The Room. In this, there are little nuggets. There are little moments where it's like, oh, wow, this was almost something. You know, not necessarily like genius or great, but cool or neat. Every time, it's always pulled away out of its, because it's got its head so far up its own ass. You know, it's so self-important and full of itself, or it's just too incompetent. You know,
because it's like you said, it's extremely self-important because Dennis is supposed to be a stand-in for Andrew Getty. He wrote himself into that character, which is weird because Andrew Getty is not handicapped or was not mentally disabled. This idea of the whole like central conceit of the film is like, when you're dreaming, is that you telling yourself stories? Because if not, then who's telling the stories? You know, and that's like, he had all of these nightmares and he's trying to write himself into that character. But it's very weird.
Well, I think...
Or did he see himself that way?
The most beautiful aspect of him writing himself into that character, I find, is one that might have not been intentional. And that is the fact that Dennis wishes he could sound as smart as his brother. And what tricks Dennis into murdering all those people is the allure of sounding smarter, of being like more intelligent.
Right.
Of not being slow.
That's how the demon...
And in other words, just being able to like communicate to people. And I love the idea that like Getty was writing himself into this character and he was clearly had some sort of struggle with trying to communicate a message to people. And like this film is like really horribly trying to communicate a message poorly.
Not being perceived as intelligent by other people when you actually are. I think that's the part with that.
I think that's kind of a beautiful reflection of like the artist's inner thoughts in a way.
And I think that's
a really interesting reading, actually.
I'm really into that because I think it kind of speaks to why he was so obsessed about making this movie perfect and like essentially ruining himself financially to make this movie up until the day he died. And I think it's because if he gave up on it, he would see himself as a failure and all of those people who think that he's not as smart or as talented or whatever would be right, that he would be proving them right. That's why Dennis keeps murdering these people, is because he has to prove himself. He has to finish his masterpiece, this thing that he's building, because he has to prove to people that he's actually intelligent. That's exactly what's happening here.
He has to build this huge display of marionettes to show that he's in control.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah, no, that's it. That's exactly what this movie is. Oh my god.
Right, it's in other words, the core of this film is a dipshit trying to communicate to people that he's smart.
Honestly,
whether we're talking about Getty or we're talking about Dennis, same premise.
What I find most surprising about at this point is that Andrew Getty did not star in this movie. Like, that's one of the hallmarks of the Vanity Project, is like, that's Tommy Wiseau, that's Neil Breen, that's fucking John Micklethorpe.
This definitely had some shades of Neil Breen, I do want to say.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. This is such a fucking bizarre movie, because I like we mentioned, there's some things that I legitimately thought were quite cool.
Or at the very least fun.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about his brother.
Yes.
For a little bit, who's played by Sean Patrick Flanery, who at the time this came out, was a big star.
Decent,
is hot off the heels of Boondock Saints.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to mention. Last week we had Norman Reedus. This week we have Sean Patrick Flanery.
Yeah.
We got both the Boondock Saints in 2 weeks.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, and Dina Meyer, during the time this was filming, she was in like Saw, for example.
That's
she was
where I've
in
seen
other
her before.
big movies. I love how Sean Patrick Flanery's character is always putting on a tie throughout the whole movie.
In so many
there's
scenes.
A sequence where Dennis wakes back up into reality and his brother is standing in front of the mirror putting on a tie, like in his room.
But wasn't that another?
It then turns out to be a dream, but yes, it's
Fuck, that's right.
It does
God
present.
damn it.
They do the thing that we've talked about many times on the show, where some weird, spooky shit happens. Smash cut to somebody sitting up in bed and breathing heavily.
Yeah,
they do this so many times in this movie, but that is one of the most bizarre, when he just sits up in bed and his brother is in his room, like tying his tie in the mirror. It's like, oh hey, sounds like you're having a pretty bad dream. It's like, what the fuck?
And that's the setup for a jump scare.
Yeah, because it turns out
Like
to be...
what? Like why is something as dumb and goofy
If
as
I
that
remember correctly, the most bizarre part of that is it wasn't even Dennis's dream. It was Dina Meyer's dream, right? Wasn't that the part where
man. I got
she
it's
woke
such
up?
whiplash.
Well, no, he woke up and she asked him about that event.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sean Patrick Flannery turns into Matthew Berryman in the mirror, and Dennis wakes up again, and then we cut to the brother and his girlfriend in bed, and she's like, didn't you just get up and go tell Dennis to take a bath or whatever? It's like, what?
Yeah, bizarre. I also want to mention that out of nowhere, the whole inciting event of this movie happens where the brother just puts a huge mirror into the middle of his brother's room.
Yeah, and like demand, like, this mirror is gonna be in your room now because
Because the script needs it to be.
I mean, literally his justification for it, and he's being a douche about it too. His whole justification is that it matches the wood in that room.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
And also, like, this is Dennis's room, which is like effectively the room of a child. Like, there's a bunch of scribbled coloring.
A giant hamster.
Yeah, he has built
maze.
Hamster tubes going across the room, which I thought at some point would have some kind of
payoff,
like, significance.
I mean, we got the cool shot where you like go through the tube and then you see the hamster.
Right,
that was
like
pretty
that
cool.
that was a good shot, and it's like the hamster thing never has any payoff.
It really doesn't.
It's just like, look at this man child with his kitty stuff in his room. Like, that's what it felt like.
Well,
also, like, it shows that Dennis is an empathetic person and like loves and cares for his animals and stuff, and like is also like has a childlike heart and mind. He cares about ice cream. He likes stuff like that. But yet he like kills and murders the kids and the pets. And
yeah, well,
and
I
also
mean,
the movie, the intro sets us up to believe that he only appears to be disabled on the outside, and that inside he has like the astute mind or whatever, but that's so disjointed because, like you said, his behavior is like that of a child. Like, he wants to go get ice cream.
Well, it's trying to have its cake and eat it too with the demon.
Yeah,
the demon being like actually him or something like supernatural taking control of him. It tries to have its cake and eat it too. Like, it's either one or the other, because one breaks your reality and one doesn't. like one breaks your narrative,
right?
And it doesn't choose.
You gotta pick one.
Yeah, exactly, and it doesn't. It's a fucking mess.
It's a Silent Hill version on the Mirror version, essentially.
Yeah.
It's the dark place, essentially.
Yes, the Black Lodge.
The Black Lodge. Yes,
like,
very much so.
To talk about Lynch, like, this is very Twin Peaks in many respects.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I guess when they started production, it wouldn't have been that many years after Twin Peaks, within the last decade.
Yeah, or 10 Peeps.
10 Peeps.
The stuff with him being slow and his quote-unquote inner mind or soul, I guess, maybe his soul being
is that
the
what it's
same.
Supposed to be?
Yeah, because he was a savant when he was, young.
Yeah, the big twist later. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think that contextualizes some of what's going on with that stuff.
Yeah.
In an interesting way, in a way that I feel like makes it feel a little more thought out. Maybe not excellently handled. It's still pretty fucking offensive.
It is, and also I think it makes a lot of the events that happened before that in the movie confusing.
Yeah.
You could say nonsense.
I don't think it's nonsense. I mean,
it's not nonsense, but it's underdeveloped.
Yes, it's definitely underdeveloped.
it's incoherent. It's not nonsense, but it's incoherent. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Sean Patrick Flannery and his girlfriend and their what feels
Their strange
relationship, and just like that whole subplot I don't really understand. I thought that like Dennis was going to be the central character, but there's so much shit where it's just like Sean Patrick Flannery going to the same 2 restaurants over and over again.
Yeah, and bouncing between every other scene. It's him talking to Dina Meyer and him talking to his therapist.
Exactly. And literally there's a restaurant for each one of them. And it
You're so right, though. They had 2 restaurants.
There's 2 restaurants they go to because there's multiple scenes of him having dinner with Dina Myers at that one restaurant, which they very obviously, they got permission to shoot there one evening. So they had to shoot a few scenes there. And then similarly, anytime he's talking with his therapist, it's at this like outdoor tiki bar.
With the exception of the first scene we see with him where they're talking in like a broom closet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the therapist, the actor, like just textbook of overacting.
Also,
textbook
like,
example of overacting.
Also, textbook example of terrible therapist. He's so pushy and aggressive.
Yeah.
He's so pushy and aggressive. He's like, you know what? I know you can't afford to keep seeing me, but I'll let you come see me on my lunch break on the one condition that we talk about what I want to talk about. It's like, excuse me, sir.
Yeah, what the
You're
fuck?
the therapist. Yeah. We're supposed to talk about what I want to talk about. But there's this whole long, drawn-out subplot of, like, Sean Patrick Flannery and Dina Myers wanting to get married, but she doesn't want to live with an invalid, and he doesn't want to put his brother in a hospital because, as we find out later, apparently Dennis was like a genius when he was a kid, and then Sean Patrick Flannery punched him in the face, and he fell down the stairs and became mentally disabled.
Now, I don't know a lot about head trauma.
I don't think that's quite how it works.
But yeah, I'm
don't-
not under the impression
I don't
it
think head
happens that
trauma
way.
gives you Down syndrome, but I might be wrong.
Could be wrong, but I don't think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't directly Down syndrome, but it was pretty close.
It's a gumbo. It's sort of a goulash.
Hyperbole
Yeah.
for comedic effect.
Yeah.
But brain damage can mess people up like that.
Well, for
know?
sure, absolutely.
Yes.
But
and head trauma can definitely cause like all sorts of things. But
It
this
gets a little
character,
dicey.
well, it gets extremely dicey when, much like John Travolta and other like mentally handicapped characters in films, they have randomly varying degrees of like mental aptitude. Their IQ is constantly swinging from scene to scene because it's whatever is convenient to the script at the time.
Yeah.
And it's honestly one of the most like offensive elements about it, like in any of those sorts of films, is just how all over the place it can be.
I think that was
its
better
way.
handled than The Fanatic in this
Oh
one.
yeah, no, it definitely
oh,
was.
okay, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. If we're talking about what's a more offensive depiction of the mental disability, The Fanatic,
I
for
feel like
sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The
I definitely agree with
elements
that.
of that variation come out of the mirror self and him coming into
Yeah.
reality through tricking and convincing the normal one to do his bidding.
Yeah. I think the difference between this and The Fanatic is The Fanatic is way more mean-spirited. Like,
Yeah.
like it feels like Fred Durst like making fun of disabled people, whereas this, I don't feel it's offensive, but I don't think that was the intention.
Well,
more misguided.
See, here's the thing, though.
than
Whether it's
anything else.
making fun or not, it's the same problem I have with Glass. It's the same problem I have with all the others. Or Glass or Split and all those. It's like it's just utilizing like the mentally handicapped is like a little fear engine, right? It's like, oh, like disabled people are spooky,
Right.
And
I
like,
mean,
and that's what's most reprehensible about it. Like,
for sure. I'm not
most definitely.
arguing that. I just think that where Fred Durst is coming from the perspective of a bully, Andrew Getty was probably coming from the perspective of somebody more misguided.
Yes.
The effect is similar.
I definitely agree
I
with
think
that.
The
on
effect is
top of
similar,
that,
though.
considering the fact that he saw himself
Right.
in Dennis, like, I think that gives Dennis an almost sort of empathy. He becomes an empathetic character.
I think he's
in the
supposed.
second half.
I think he's
Or
supposed
at least he's
to.
supposed to. Yeah.
I never really felt empathetic towards him, but I think you're right that is the intention. But I think you're also onto something, Cleveland, where like the degree of his disability fluctuates wildly depending upon what the scene calls for. And those are the examples where it's like the grossest, like when they go to that nautical Chuck E. Cheese place.
Oh my god!
That
Now, I said it during the movie, and I'll say it again. On paper, nautical Chuck E. Cheese sounds awesome. On paper, some of the themes and ideas in this movie sound great.
One of my favorite bits in that Guardian article I sent you guys about this is, you know that animatronic octopus?
Yes.
In the background.
They look like garbage.
He spent 10 months on that, making it himself.
You never even get do you get like a close up of it?
No, you get
No.
like 10 seconds of it.
Christ.
it's always in the background. I don't know if we ever get a shot of it when it's fully in focus, but yeah, apparently Andrew Getty built that himself. He built a lot of the props himself, and that's also like the degree of effectiveness of that is kind of confusing as well, because like I think the big marionette people spider at the end, pretty cool.
Awesome.
Right. The big octopus playing the drum set,
Very
looks
bad.
terrible and very, very bad. But like that scene is just like another one of those ones just like, oh, what, get your stuff together, Dennis. Tonight we're gonna do whatever you want to do. You're in charge. He's like, I want pizza. Like, I knew I said I wasn't gonna do it.
Do what? Rolling on, moving on.
But like, it's just like, oh my god, this is immediately following like a scene where he's like having this tortured argument with himself in the mirror about like why he just went out and murdered 3 children, you know, like
My favorite variation in like the understanding of how smart or slow Dennis is the fact that even though Sean Patrick Flannery like treats him like a child for the majority of the movie, he also trusts him to do his own carpentry in the basement.
yeah, trust him implicitly. Like here's the sound, and never once actually goes down there to see what it's about. Like in that
What a
first
terrible
scene,
caretaker.
He
terrible
tries
caretaker.
He tries to, and Dennis talks him out of it.
And then he leaves to let Dennis do his carpentry for a few more hours.
Yeah, he leaves
And
his
then
mentally
talks-
challenged brother with hacksaws. and
Talks to
shit.
Dina Meyer about how he could get a carpentry job someday.
Right, like
he
maybe-
had a he had a tool belt and goggles and everything.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He told her that he was dressed like a professional carpenter.
Dude just had some goggles
He
on.
had goggles on. And also in that scene, he did find Dennis's books on tape because apparently Dennis can't read, and they're books on tape about like taxidermy and butchery and forensics. And he's like, "What are you doing with these?" He's like, "Oh, I guess those must have been the other guys at the store. I must have gotten the wrong ones. Oopsie daisies." And they just. My favorite thing though, I don't know if you guys.
Well, the books on tape are brought up several times
Multiple
after
times.
that, which is even funnier, honestly.
My favorite thing, I don't know if you guys caught this, but later in the movie, like when it gets close to Dennis unveiling his master marionette show, Sean Patrick Flannery and Dina Myers are going to all of these same places, and they're like, where is everybody? Where's all the normal people? And then they're driving around. It's like, maybe there's something going on here. Dennis is building something in the basement. He has books on tape about taxidermy. All of our friends are missing. And by all of their friends, they literally mean the valets and waiters at the same two restaurants they go to, because those are the people that they explicitly mention are missing. It's the waiters.
And the girl, of course, the girl at the ice cream store that they go to get coffee at.
Yeah, right. Who Dennis is in love with. That. Ooh,
let's just not even, honestly.
Well, we don't have to talk about that scene, but I do think it's worth mentioning.
I don't want to.
When he cartwheels out
when
of
he rolls a nat 20 on his acrobatics check.
And cartwheels out of the cabinet onto the ceiling and then flips down onto the floor to chase her with a knife.
Yeah, what the fuck?
That was pretty sweet.
That was amazing.
That was pretty tight.
Yeah, and then she runs out to the street and just gets hit by a car.
I love how Dennis does all of his murdering in broad daylight and nobody ever notices. What about when he's in the bathroom and he just stabs that dude on the toilet for no reason and picks him up and throws his body out the window and then goes and doesn't have a drop of blood on him.
Nothing.
One of my favorite elements of that sequence is you get this really cool, almost like POV shot of like him getting like murdered and like blood is coming onto the camera and everything, and blood is just going everywhere. And the next shot, no blood anywhere.
It's clean as a whistle.
The same as when Dennis kills Dina Myers at the end.
Oh my god, we gotta talk about the killer Dennis baby.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, what the fuck was that?
Oh, fuck, yeah, that was so weird. That's another thing is, like, when you talk about the film needing to choose whether, like, it's all just in his head or if there's actually something supernatural, and then you see scenes where, like, she comes into the house and there's a crying baby in in the bassinet.
Right.
That has not been there before, and she looks at it, and all of a sudden the baby morphs into Dennis, who pops out of the bassinet.
And does a alakadabra, alakazam, where the fuck is the knife? Haha, and it disappears. And then she like runs down the hallway really scared and looks down at her gut.
And then she's been stabbed by the knife! The knife's there! Why the fuck?
Like, so it's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm sorry, but like she saw this. This is from her perspective. And she's experiencing like the supernatural.
There's no way it's actually in his head.
So what the fuck is it? Which is it? Like,
But he takes her down to the basement, and we get a scene of him drilling some holes into her head, and there's never any blood on the drill.
Nope.
That's another thing. But then the best part is he takes a fire extinguisher and shoves it into one of the holes in her head and uses it to blow her brains out the other hole to hollow out her skull, which I thought was pretty fucking funny.
Yeah, no, it was a hilarious effect. The effect itself was like not
pretty
bad,
right.
which made it even funnier too. Like there was a little bit of craftsmanship in it, which made it really funny. The whole baby Dennis thing was so bizarre, and like that's just a shining example of like how so many of these kills and sequences in this movie just
don't make sense.
Yeah, they're nonsense.
Keep me completely off my bearings. Like,
well, like when the cops come in, the social worker comes in with the
worst cops. We got to talk about that.
And she walks in the door and she's like, "Hello, is anybody here? I'm here to take Dennis away from you because you're unfit guardians or whatever." And the cops are like, "Well, sounds like there's nobody home. We don't have a warrant." And she's like, "Well, just keep it to whatever you can see immediately." And then walks in, and then the cops walk in with her.
And then they immediately smell something good, and one goes to the kitchen to eat their food.
Yep. And the other one's like, "I swear you better save me a piece." But then that cop goes upstairs and goes into Dennis's room and sees like the two mirrors facing each other.
Yeah, we get another supernatural kill.
And he walks by, and his reflection then comes out of the mirror, cuts his throat, and then turns into Dennis. So I don't know. I mean, it's It's supernatural.
Yeah, it's supernatural. We should talk about the social worker too. I want to talk about the early sequence when we see the social worker, where it's just like a relentless, constant 360 around Sean Patrick Flannery and her talking about how he's not fit to keep her.
Oh yeah, the camera just wouldn't stop.
It's not even a 360. It's worse than that. The camera keeps moving behind an object and coming out on the other side of another object. So like it's instead of your typical like reverse shot for the conversation, every one of those reverse shots is a pan that goes behind an object and comes out on the other side as the reverse shot. And the first couple of times that they did it, I was like, oh, okay, that's
fun
kind of
style
cool.
thing.
I was like, oh yeah, cool. That's a little stylistic flair.
And
then it's for the entire fucking scene.
Well, and the funniest part is like I like the concept of that shot in itself, but it has no reason to be paired with the conversation they're having.
It's a
There's
completely
no
bland
context.
scene. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's totally bland. It's not like a revelatory scene or anything. There's not any like plot changing information being revealed or anything.
No, and it's poorly thought out too.
It's a totally innocuous.
Like it doesn't sound like any kind of conversation a social worker would be having.
Yeah, it's like a totally innocuous conversation. Yeah, like she's behaving so like
that's not how people do.
I don't think Andrew Getty had an idea of how like any of the professions that he's depicting.
No, but he sure as fuck thought he did.
He doesn't know how.
Oh man.
He didn't know how to write as people talked either.
No.
Like, no dialogue in this movie sounds like people, much like The Room.
And they're often a hallmark of vanity projects.
Although
they're so caught up in their own echo chamber.
Although, whereas in The Room, it's obviously because like Tommy Wiseau is not a native English speaker, that the dialogue sounds off. In this, it's more just like it's
a lot of verbose flourishes.
Yes, extremely hyper pedantic, film student-y.
Yeah. Yes,
film student-y. Fuck. I'm trying to think what else. Like, there's so much in this movie. Like, there's so many choice lines and scenes.
What about that bizarre scene where Dennis is dreaming and there's the giant spider that comes out?
Oh, yeah. That was... The spider didn't
and, like, deflates him?
The spider didn't look great, but when it, like... deflates him, that was a pretty cool effect. I was kind of into that.
Yeah, I kind of wish that they weren't like so reliant on all the shots of spiders in that nature documentary thing leading up to it. A little displeased with that. I'm super arachnophobic, so like shots of spiders' faces and stuff, and just
spiders
like,
was kind of a motif, in this movie. So
kind of blech, you know.
Well, I mean the whole idea is that like spiders devour their family. So it's like the thing about the spider metaphor is I don't know who it's supposed to apply to. I don't know if Dennis is supposed to be the spider, or if Sean Patrick Flannery is supposed to be the spider, or in that scene when he's watching the documentary and it's talking about how the female spiders are so much bigger than the males and that they eat the males after mating, that is intercut with Sean Patrick Flannery arguing with his girlfriend at the restaurant. So in that scene, it's supposed to imply that she is the spider? Who is the spider?
They're all the spiders.
They're all the spider. I don't understand.
Which is great for relating to people or worrying about them or having any concern about your story or plot.
Once again, it's
everyone's a spider.
Once again, it's just hilariously misguided because it's obvious that like Andrew Getty wanted the spider to be thematic, that he put effort into making it a recurring theme.
A lot of effort.
But what the theme, what it's supposed to what it's supposed to be referring to is completely unclear.
Right. Well, he did it because there's supposed to be a theme, right?
Yes.
Not like so that the theme was built to serve a purpose, right? It's like building a house and putting a fireplace in it because houses are supposed to have fireplaces and putting the fireplace in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's it's the same idea.
They say that the whole impetus for this film is like a series of nightmares that he had. Some of the dream logic stuff, despite that the quality is drastically varying, some of it is cool and surreal and evocative, and I would really like to know more about the nightmares in Andrew Getty's head that led him to make this movie, that compelled him to obsessively devote the rest of his life to this film.
Yeah, one other thing I saw reading a little backstory on this movie that wasn't in the Guardian piece is the Dennis character was partially based on the Son of Sam.
Okay.
Which kind of makes sense.
I get that. Yeah, I can see that.
Another write-in comparing Dennis and Getty is that Dennis is a person who has been like handicapped by his evil family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That theme of devouring your family, of the familial betrayal.
Being handicapped by an evil family.
I mean, I think Andrew Getty grew up having everything he ever could have wanted and needed from his family, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, the Getty family is historically like a pretty fucking dysfunctional family.
God, wildly so.
Like,
wildly
check
so.
out, I think it's All the Money in the World to see more about like how like his cousin was like held hostage and his family refused to pay ransom.
Kidnapped, by like the Italian mob or something.
Yeah, Christ.
There was a good mini series with
that FX did,
Donald
I think,
Sutherland about that. I don't think I ever finished watching that series.
I saw the first couple episodes. I think probably when you were watching it. I didn't finish it either, but I mean I can't say I'm surprised that, like, knowing that family's history, that how Andrew Getty turned out.
Yeah. Get a lot of weird nightmares.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think to sort of bring things to a close, another parallel to The Room is that it ends with somebody shooting themselves in the mouth in slow motion.
Well, we got to talk about the ending sequence because that is one of the wildest effect sequences in the movie.
We've talked about a little bit, but yeah, Dennis's big marionette stage production using all the bodies that he's
the brother
taxidermied
stuck to the chair via like super glue. we see like a couple shots of him like struggling to lift his arm, and the goo like coming up a little bit, and then the brother like fake acting, like throwing his hand back down on the chair to imply that like he's been pulled back down.
Yeah, I thought that was funny as fuck that he
it was so fake
that he glued him to the chair, but like a spider, he's stuck in the web.
But he's a spider. I don't.
Right, but right in that scene, Dennis tells Sean Patrick Flannery that he is the spider, but then who the fuck is the spider? And then there's the flesh spider made out of body parts and the social worker's head. So
why is she the spider?
Is she the spider?
Right. Who's the spider?
The whole sequence where they're retelling the story of what happened to Dennis as marionettes was so funny to me.
Oh my God.
Seeing him get pushed down the stairs and just like do loop-de-loops.
This body cartwheeling in the air as like
stairs are moving.
A rotating screen showing stairs is moving behind it. That was so funny. But like, yeah, that scene is weird because it's like a culmination of some of the funniest and dumbest, but also some of like the coolest stuff in the same scene. Like, I thought the effect of like Dina Myers being puppeted by Dennis was pretty cool, or you like see,
it was pretty fucked up looking.
See like the tips of his fingers poking out of her mouth, and she's got like these big fake eyes that are like moving around independently. I thought that stuff was pretty creepy and well set up. And then the big flesh spider, and then Sean Patrick Flannery detaches himself from the chair, and instead of killing Dennis, puts the gun in his mouth, much like Tommy Wiseau, and then we get the slow motion gunshot. He's even wearing similar clothes to what Tommy Wiseau is wearing in that scene, and it's lit kind of the same too. It's really weird.
If only he'd like rubbed his crotch with a blanket first.
I mean, there's so much more, but like I think I'm ready to rate at this point.
This is a movie that has to be seen to be believed.
Yeah, I mean, if you somehow sat through all of this, like,
I'd rather watch The Room personally, like for the 12th time, but I don't know.
This movie
That's my
has
take.
cult
That's my
classic written all over it for
Yeah.
me. I thought this movie was a blast to watch.
Well, Ben, why don't you rate it
Comically
first?
misguided.
Because
I
it was
think,
your choice.
Yes. Okay. So I think on the reading of this being kind of a reflection of how Andrew Getty views himself and the world, is really fascinating, and I think there's a lot to glean out of that. I think this movie was a bizarre amalgamation of, someone who had very ambitious goals and not the skills to get to those goals, but had the funding to make those goals a reality.
Yeah.
And considering how meth addicted he was at the time, it really emphasizes how relentless and frenetic this whole movie is.
And scatterbrained.
I found it fascinating and most of the time hilariously misguided. And then there would be flourishes of just amazing effects, practical effects, and like interesting shots and unique things where in like normal good bad movies there's no artifice like that, and it seems like he really cared to make a movie.
Absolutely.
It is horribly misguided and like it is very bad, but it's all entertaining bad in my opinion. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this movie.
Cleveland?
Yeah, I was going to ask if I could go next because you don't want to end on my rating. I think there's a lot of validity to your points. I think that you could totally sit down and have a hilarious, so bad it's good time. For my very personal taste, it was extremely difficult, and it was kind of a slog for me just because of self-importance like that really rubs me the wrong way. And also like almost being good films that are just nearly like have something going for them and miss the mark. I tend to find much more frustrating than wildly missing the mark, like The Room or whatever else, or Troll or something. Like those films do such a beautiful job of wildly missing the mark. Whereas this film is almost something that's more of a frustration for me. I'm gonna give it 2 stars. There are some really cool little nuggets in there, but it was just so much to fucking sit through.
Yeah, man, this is maybe one of the most difficult times I've had rating a film that we've done for this show, because I think that I loved and hated this movie in equal measure for everything that I found frustrating. There was something that I found delightful and almost endearing. I find like the sort of obsessive dedication to a vision charming, despite how chaotic and messy and bad that vision is. It's so weird. Like there's so much just terrible shit in this movie, and a few instances of just like unparalleled creativity and good weirdness from a horror movie. And I think that because it's so polarizing for me, I'm gonna rate it dead in the middle, 2.5 out of 5, because it's not good, but I can't give it like the rating that I would give something that I truly hated.
Would you recommend it?
Yes. If you are a fan of vanity projects, cult classic, so bad it's good, because I think you're right. I think this will gain cult classic status. Honestly, like if you're in favor of something different and somebody experimenting and in many ways failing with their experiment. I would absolutely recommend this movie. I don't rate it 2.5 because I think it's a middling movie. It's because I cannot choose a side of my emotions on this. I can't decide whether I loved or hated it. So I don't know if that's not a recommendation, then I don't know what is. But it will give The Evil Within an average of 2.8 out of 5 pods. So no golden pod this time, but the strangest movie I've seen in a very, very long time.
It was a weird one.
Yeah. Well, next week is our 100th episode. And if you want to know what that is going to be about, then you're just going to have to tune in because I'm not going to tell you.
Nope.
Haha.
I'm not going to tell you, but it is a movie that we have all been wanting to talk about for a long time and couldn't decide when would be the most appropriate time to do it, and we said, fuck it, 100 episodes, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, man, I can't wait.
So join us for our 100th episode special next week. Cleveland, do we have a sponsor?
Always. I mean, no, not always. But this time, yes.
This time, yeah.
This week is brought to you by Cheryl Duber's Ice Cream Scoopers. The perfect implement for stirring your coffee. If you need to stir your coffee with an ice cream scoop, come on down to Cheryl Duper's Ice Cream Scoopers, because now it's a chain. Come on down to it, and come get a nice hot cup of coffee at the ice cream parlor, like normal people do. Cheryl Duper's Pooper Scoopers. There you go. Good job. We did it.
Okay. Well, that's that.
Well done. Good job. Good job for you for listening. I appreciate it. Well done.
We did it.
We're proud of you.
Made it.
If you like the show and you want to give us a 100 episode congratulations present,
we'd love that.
The best way to do that is to go on to Apple Podcasts and rate us 5 stars and leave us a nice review so we can climb in the charts. That would be much appreciated. You can follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and on letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod, where you can find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. And you can find me on Twitter at Deep State Ozzy, still quarantined, still COVID-free, at least at the time of recording.
Yeah, don't jinx yourself. Jesus Christ.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
And I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studio as we continue to roll out our big game. It Stares Back. You know the drill. Come check us out on Steam. Come hop in our Discord. Say hello. Check out our website at lightarcstudio.com. And of course, if you want to see some more of those lovely illustrations and paintings, or, well, I shouldn't say that. If you want to look at some art and decide whether you think it looks good or not, feel free to pop into my art station. Cleveland Mosier, just search me on ArtStation and check out my portfolio, see what you like. If you're looking for some art yourself, commissions are open right now, and I'd love to paint something for you. That's all from me.
All right. Well, next week, 100 episodes. We did it.
Oh my
Yay.
God. We'll see you then.
There is a spider, it's deep in my soul. He's lived here for years. He just won't let go. He's laying around. He's got a mean bite. Now he's ready to fight. And stand up for what he knows. I don't need your trophy, so you go. I just wanna tell you all, go yourself. Oh, shit. Go yourself.
Is he spitting?
He's spitting.
Oh, he's spitting at them. Is that the sign? Screw it.
Sign.
Spit!